Thanks for joining another episode of the podcast, They Learn, You Win. I'm your host, David Wentworth. And today we're going to be speaking with DJ Jaeger, who is a learning leader at Akamai Technologies. She also teaches instructional design courses at Portland State University. And we're talking today about technology and leveraging the LMS, sort of far beyond what a lot of companies do as a basic need for the LMS. At Akamai Technologies, DJ has been able to, over time, expand the scope and scale of the LMS and how they leverage it. So we talk a little bit about what goes into making those decisions, how you pick the right tools, and then how you leverage them to actually drive results rather than simply tracking and following compliance. So it's a really interesting conversation, and thanks for joining us. So I'm here with DJ Jaeger, and she is the senior team manager with global technical training for Akamai Technologies. I really appreciate you joining me. We're here at DevLearn. So I'm doing this little series of live face-to-face podcasts, which is very exciting for me because normally we're all sitting in our little distant offices doing these things. So I really appreciate that. And especially because you were speaking at this event. And it turns out you're speaking about something that is near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time in the past, my past life as an industry analyst, helped a lot of organizations go through the thing that you're about to talk about. So I know how challenging it can be, and currently work for a provider who tries to help people guide them through this process. So DJ, your session is looking around, how do I figure out how to select an LMS that meets our needs, right? Essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yes, just tell us a little bit about, like, you can start at the beginning, what was the genesis of this? Like, what made you decide, hey, we need to find something new? And then just walk us through some of the things you went through.
Yeah, absolutely. So my company is very technically minded.
Of
So
course.
it's a cloud computing cloud provider. And so as a result, there's a lot of technical training that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so we needed a way to train our customers, and we needed a way to train our channel partners on how best to navigate and even pitch and sell our products on behalf of us. So we really decided we needed a standalone, dedicated customer training platform. And in doing so, we really kind of had to analyze all of our needs and truly understand what it was that we were hoping to do with this platform, the technical requirements, and then what we wanted the learner experience to look like on the end for our customers.
Of course.
So we really went through an extensive process, and as a company, we were able to choose our best solution, but that was just step one.
Right. Yeah. And I, what you're describing, I think is important to understand what your environment is. I think you guys have a relatively unique environment with that whole channel partnership where you really do have to do a really good job of training this audience, but they don't really work for you. Right. They're just, their job is to know as much as they possibly can about your products and help you sell them. So it's a really unique relationship there where you're trying to deliver that kind of level of training to people who don't work for you. So there really is, for these organizations where you're training everybody in-house, it's a captive audience. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Right. Yeah. But these audiences have choices, and it's in your best interest to deliver that kind of experience. So clearly you need a tool that's going to handle that. So, the process about how, like, if you thought, how long does it take, say, from starting to scope out that you need this to maybe, where are you guys through implementation?
We are through implementation of our most initial stages, and now we're in expansion stages.
Gotcha. So I think that's a great milestone, a key milestone. So, like, about how long of the process?
Yeah, I think the process for us from the initial outset to implementation, standing up, launching was about a year.
Yeah. That's actually pretty impressive for an organization size and complexity of yours.
We really implemented a crawl, walk, run type of methodology where we had the minimal understanding of this is what success looks like for our first stage.
Yeah.
And then adding on and building from there. So, our platform has been around for about 4 years now, and it looks different every year. There's procedural changes that happen here and there. Sometimes they're small, but sometimes they're pretty big. And I think our next large process is going to be around the improving the learner experience and having it just be even more seamless than it already is.
Oh, that's great. That's a good attention. It's a good detail to focus on, I think, especially, that can get lost in that process of trying to get something like that up and running and all of the technical benchmarks. And, ultimately the whole reason you're doing all of it, really, you would hope, is for that end user experience. So it's good to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
In the early stages, what are some of the things, because like I said, I've tried to walk organizations through this, and I'd like to know, when you did things like demos, right? In that stage where you were looking at different providers and you got demos, what was the approach? Because I know that there's a wide variety. Some companies go in and say, okay, show me what you got. And then the vendor will come and show them all the bells and whistles. Others will come in and very scripted and say, I need to watch your system do this scenario that I've laid out. Where do you guys fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, we kind of struck a middle ground where we had a clear understanding of the expected behavior and outcome, but not necessarily the process used to get there. So we know we needed to deliver, training in different methodologies, modalities, and we wanted to have a platform that was dynamic enough and would support different types of swarm files, and not be really selective with that kind of level, because we had some historic courses that we wanted to make sure we could still import successfully. We needed to make sure video playback was seamless. There was no issue with buffering or delayed delivery on any of that, because we are a delivery
Of course.
company. So we wanted to make that learner experience really stellar, but we also weren't stuck in any ways of ensuring that happened. So we were open to say, here's our list of requirements that we need this end product to deliver for us. Can your platform do that? And if so, can you show us how it works and what it looks like?
And in the course of going through this, was there a plan? Did you know ahead of time that with the content that you already have, right, the things that you're already doing, was it saying, like, we need to keep this, we need to keep delivering it, so how do we use all of this in this new system? Or was there also, we're transitioning content to, or, so is it a blend?
It was. So a lot of our channel partner content was housed in an area that was accessible for those partners, but not accessible for customers.
Right.
And so we had this very siloed approach and a lot of different disparate resources located, wildly different spots. And we wanted to find a way to bring all of those resources together, manage it, make sure everything is updated accordingly. There's no, disconnection between those different platforms or resources. So I think we really had that mentality of wanting to consolidate a lot of the effort, see if we can find some automations, but also the idea of building for future proofing as best as possible. So really understanding what it was that we wanted to do today, but also tomorrow and a year down the road and 2 years down the road.
Gotcha.
So building that in as part of our strategic planning, understanding what we could do with the tool. And even if it's not a feature that we have enabled today, it's one we could enable in the future and then use that when we're ready.
See, that's also very key. I think another thing that happens in this process is it's very easy to get bogged down into, usually the genesis for looking for a new system, I'm trying to solve some problem or problems. And then we get very hyper fixated on those problems right in front of us. And we're trying to put out that fire, not thinking of, well, okay, but once that's done, is this system going to serve me in the future for all of the things I need to do? It's very hard sometimes to lift up and look at it. And so it's nice to hear that you've thought about that. One sort of mundane question, I mean, at least I think so, but it's important because it comes up all the time. Did you guys do like an actual RFP where you would send out and say, here's a form of the things that we want, please check the box if you have these?
I don't think we sent it out formally, but internally we had a spreadsheet that we used. And everyone from all the different members of our teams, when they would evaluate, they would look at things. So we had several different people on our teams be the testing group, and they would all look at different components. So I would look at delivery and learner experience, but I have a solutions architect on my team. So he would look at what's the possibility of, connecting to data resources and what integrations could we connect, right? We had other people looking at the different components of this whole ask that we were making. So I think each person had their area of expertise. So we brought in that SME to evaluate, and we all collectively filled in that spreadsheet till we had essentially a clear winner. We had some identified key performances where if they didn't have this feature, it would be a no-go.
Right.
So I think we were able to really use the expertise of the folks on our team to help whittle down the choices because there are quite a few out there.
Of course. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that I think talking to companies, they get bogged down in that process too. And they sort of very often will default to a very generic list of things that, well, this is what an LMS should have. So do you have this kind of thing?
Right.
And, they send it out and it all comes back from all the different providers with no context, no understanding. And what you're describing to me is the ideal approach, really, that internal RFP, right? Let's figure out what we need. Was there any sort of accountability of like, okay, you tell me you need this, can you tell me why? Like, was there a little bit of that going on? Like, is there a why behind most of these?
I think that we had the idea and the justification in place as a team. So, we have a stellar leader. She's phenomenal. And to have her say, you tell me what we need. And we came up collaboratively with this list of these are the essential pieces that we need. Right. And then for her to take a look at everything and say, okay, sounds great. Let's figure it out. So I think we needed that support from leadership to ensure that process went really smoothly. And then we also needed to have the specialist understanding of the key details, because I'm not an expert in integrations, right? But I need someone on my team who is, and I do. So being able to reference to those folks to bring in their expertise was really helpful in the process. But I don't think there was anything where we had the leadership tell us we needed anything. That came from our team.
It's funny. This process generates so many questions for me, and you're answering all the questions I have in just what you're talking about. And I love it, because I'm thinking one of the things I want to know is, do you get enough stakeholders involved from across the business? Because again, very often L&D teams, they make it a very insular process, and they think, well, we know what's best for L&D, so we're going to pick this thing. But the idea is, well, we're also trying to solve these needs. So it sounds like you've got a pretty good cross section of key stakeholders. Could you even guess like how many different either actual stakeholders or parts of the business were represented in this process, or are you just basically making sure you're...
So we're within sales.
Okay.
And so as a business unit, we're there and we're connected to the sales enablement team. So we'll do some collaborative work together there. But as far as business units represented, I mean, probably everyone but legal was represented.
They come in later.
Right. Yeah. But we had technology, the IT team, they work to configure a lot of these things on the back end with us. We've got, marketing, some of the marketing materials, and how do we pitch this platform? Is it aligned with our brand standards and guidelines? And then we have sales and tying back to sales enablement. So how best are the resources represented, right, all in one platform? What does that look like? And then even as far as working with HR to do technical onboarding and figuring out, what courses best sit where and what makes for the easiest employee onboarding experience, especially when it comes to the more HR traditional L&D based compliance courses and understanding about the company, and then the more in-depth technical understanding of each individual product, of which our company has close to 100. So there's a lot to learn about, and really bisecting that by putting all of that technical training content on one technical platform really helped delineate a lot of that, where there was initial confusion before, where it was kind of too much of a crossover.
Yeah. And I think being able to do that and being able to incorporate that onboarding process as part of the overall experience, right? You're talking about how it's really about that end user experience. That onboarding process is so critical, because it does get looked at sometimes as HR processes, like fill this out, do that. But there is learning, training that goes on in that process. And if you're not having that experience be like all of your other experiences, you've sort of set yourself up. Like those people get on board and this is what the learning experience is like. And so the next time you come to them with some great program, they're going to, I'm not so sure. And then you have to sort of win them back. So being able to streamline that is critical. You mentioned quite a few times about integrations. And so that is also a key area that I think is very important. And did you find it all, as you're trying to identify the various integrations, right? Did you ever say, oh, it turns out that's not really an integration? Like somebody thought it has to integrate with this. And it's like, well, it doesn't necessarily have to integrate. There just has to be maybe some compatibility or data sharing. Like, what's the integration conversation like? How do you find all of the different, possible integrations that might be?
Yeah. So when we kind of started with the crawl phase,
Hmm.
we had very minimal integrations. But as we've added more training programs, so that we'll get a request that comes in, hey, let's add this training program into the platform. And as we go through that evaluation process with them, we understand the business requirements and all of their technical needs. Most times, if an integration is needed, right, that's when it will reveal itself.
Mm.
So then we have to do some exploration with our IT team, with the vendor, and any tertiary vendor that we need. And it's definitely a process to go through and figure out. But if we tried to understand and imagine every single integration that we would have needed to successfully launch, we wouldn't have launched, I don't think.
True.
So we're letting them reveal themselves as we kind of go through stages and processes. I think our biggest one right now is understanding how to get the data that's currently siloed on our LMS
Mm-hmm.
and get it to talk to the enterprise data warehouse
Mm-hmm.
that is entirety at our company, and then use some business insight tools, some data visualization tools to connect to that data warehouse and start to draw some really powerful conclusions about training consumption and training behaviors, and
Yeah.
then that connection to customers and their stickiness.
Yeah.
Are they around? Do they
That's great.
renew? Do they add on? And then how we can improve then that approach.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate goal with the measurement, right? And
Yeah,
just proof that the data exists somewhere, and the business is
it's
collecting it
yeah.
somewhere. It's just a question of, do we know where it is? Do we know if we can get access to it? Can we use it? So it sounds like you guys are pretty well set up for that. The other thing that warms my heart a little bit when you're talking is that you actually addressed that no one was really saying you should look at this solution, like no from
Mm,
above, because I hear that a lot too. It's just like, well, okay, you guys can look and start making a selection, but look at this one, to the point where very often I talk to L&D leaders who are like, well, we use this, but it wasn't my choice. It was
mhm.
kind of pushed on us either from finance or from HR because it's part of a broader approach. But it sounded like you and your team was given pretty wide berth to say, we know what's right for
We
what we're trying to do.
we were, and it's a pretty unique use case. We needed to have a platform that supported that individualized learner experience based on role. So that role-based access.
Hmm.
We have, a role for prospective customers. So prospects, when they come in, they get a very different learning experience than, let's say, an employee. So prospects are one, and they get a very minimal, access to the library,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing security related. But there's kind of the initial understanding of our products, and then customers then get more, and then our channel partners, they get even more, and then
Mm-hmm.
employees get
Right.
the highest level. So a way to differentiate those learning experiences, the content that's showed to them, even how it's delivered, we that was such a standout for us that we needed a solution that provided that, and that was a pretty unique differentiator
Yep.
for us to find a good solution.
Okay, that's what you need. You need to know exactly to, get what you need to get it done. Um, so that now that you're sort of in this phase where you're sensing the excitement of, the success that you've had, and you're going to roll this out on a broader basis to more of the organization. As you sit in that moment and you look back, what's something or some things that you wish you knew at the beginning that you could have maybe addressed earlier on?
I think the biggest issue that I wish we would have tackled earlier on is this idea of data fluency and connecting the data points that are already being collected
Mm-hmm.
to the needs of the business. So um, I, along with I'm sure many other learning experts, they're so excited about learning and
Mm-hmm.
learning platforms and delivering trainings, and it's difficult, I think, sometimes to remember that not everyone has that same mindset, right?
Yep.
And so being able to convey that we're not just a cost center, right? There's valuable business impact that we can achieve using our training platform for our customers and even for our employees, and
Mm-hmm.
really ensuring that they have a good understanding of the technical components of all of our products. I wish that looking back, I would have been able to implement something related to that, finding the pieces of the business, tying that back to, the importance of the training platform, really helping to establish our ROI.
Mm-hmm.
Um, earlier on in the process, because we're doing it now, but it's a few years into it.
Yeah.
And it's definitely more difficult. But the other benefit to that, the upside to that, I think, is we have historical data that then we can pull from and start to draw conclusions from information that we got from last year, the year before.
Yeah. Very nice. The last bit I wanted to just check in on was like the whole change management aspect of it, right? Because, I've seen organizations where the employee base hates the tool that they have. They hate it. And so and the learning team doesn't like it. So they're going to replace it. But even if you're going to switch over to something new, the people that hate it, they're still resistant to change for some reason. So even in that environment, right, they're still saying, well, I'm not so sure. So are there any things that you guys did or thought about as far as, look, this change is coming? How do you prepare people for that?
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice I got around that was to find your person who opposes it the most and pull them in and have them be part of the process, because they likely have a very valid reason for saying what they're saying, for being loud. So why not get their opinion, understand what they're opposing, and then do your best to essentially turn them into an advocate.
That's great advice. Yeah, that sounds great. Because you're always told, find that champion, find that person. But if you can turn that person around, and then they're going to have this great perspective of where they're coming from and how they think about it now. So that's great.
Yeah, sometimes you can make that champion.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Well, I really appreciate you sort of sharing that story, because I know this is a very difficult process for a lot of companies to think through. Just, when you start to think about it, there's probably 700 to 1,000 LMSs out there in the world.
Yeah.
So even to just get it down to a few that you can think might start to solve your problems, and then all the way, through the rollout and all of that, it is a pretty intense process. So I'm glad to hear that you guys have had success. And I appreciate you sharing some of your thoughts. And, is it all right if anyone's listening and they maybe want to find out more about it, can they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always on LinkedIn.
Okay,
so
great. Yeah.
I'm around on LinkedIn, and I'm always posting good resources.
Oh,
So
excellent.
yeah,
Well,
definitely.
great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right.